Hello and welcome to another episode of Real Rich Advice. I'm Jordan Rich here with my teammate, co-host, partner in crime, Ned Rich, obviously my father as well, if you don't already know. So in the age of coronavirus, in the new normal, we are going to talk to you a little bit today about open houses. So this is really interesting. In the last couple of weeks, DC, Maryland, and Virginia have all started to permit open houses when it comes to selling properties. And with this, DC was the most recent state to allow it, so they were last to the game. And as a result here, we did conduct our first open house in what we like to call the new normal. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about some of our experiences in this new normal world, trying to do an open house, given the circumstances of the pandemic. So I was not at the open house. Ned was. So Dad here is going to be giving a lot of his perspective, and I'll just be sort of asking the questions and chiming in where possible. But so to start it off, you did the open house. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about how you set it up. How did it go? How did you sort of handle people coming in and out of the house and those sort of things?
Yeah, we definitely set up differently than I have in the past. One of the things that I did was I got there early, got there about 20 minutes before the open house. We were very careful, put out hand sanitizer, actually had a can of Lysol out there, wiped down the door, wiped down some of the surfaces that anticipated people touching. The other thing that I did was actually had painter's tape with me and taped off the sidewalk and made sure that I put X's. Actually, I had a tape measure with me and made sure the spaces were 8 feet apart because we didn't know how many people were going to show up. And so I figured monitor the people coming in and made sure everybody kept their distance, which I must say everybody was wonderful about it. So yeah, it was very different.
Right. And so you were talking to me a little bit about how you manage traffic in the house. Tell me a little bit about how many people you actually had come to the open house.
Mm-hmm.
We did the open house right on Saturday and Sunday, so 2 days. How many people per day? How did you handle sort of people coming into the house?
Sure.
Restrictions on numbers, those sort of things.
Sure. So on Saturday, there were 27 groups that came through. And what I did was, as I said, we had people, I had the tape on the sidewalk. People would then walk up to the front door, had a little table where they would Purell their hands or use hand sanitizer, sign in, and then go in, only allowing 2 groups in at a time. So the good thing about this house was it was a 3-level house. So people were directed to go upstairs first. Right. So they would go upstairs and then kind of wait a few minutes for the second group to come in. So by the time the group had hit the first floor, somebody else went upstairs, and then we had them exits through the lower level. So it actually worked very well to have just a nice rotation of constant people. But at the same time, everybody kept their distance, which they liked and shared with us because, of course, at the end, I would ask, how'd that go? Also ask what other people were doing. And 2 groups seems to be, for the most part, the standard that everybody's using right now.
And how many people did you have at the open?
27 groups on Saturday and 19 groups on Sunday. Yeah.
So that's sort of more turnout than we've been seeing. We've been doing open houses. We've had them available in the district for, I think, about 3 weeks now. Mm-hmm. And this was sort of the best turnout, the most, quote, normal turnout that we would expect. Yeah. And one of the attendees, you were saying, sort of made an interesting comment about this was their first time sort of venturing out in the open houses, even though they had been around, right?
Yeah, there were several people actually that I talked to, because trying to gauge what's going on in the market, trying to gauge what consumers are comfortable with. And there were a fair number of people that this was their first time since we started doing open houses again during the pandemic, that people were coming out. So my takeaway was that people are coming out when they're serious to look at houses. We had a few neighbors that would come by, but for the most part, there were no what I would call tire kickers. There were people that are very serious and very efficient when they walk through the house. Unlike previous open houses where people would hang out and talk to you, they were in, looking, and then they got out. And sometimes they'd want to talk to you when they're outside. But for the most part, people were, like I said, efficient, get in, get out, and keep their distance.
Right, and you were talking about how a majority of the people had real estate agents, and only about 10% of people didn't. Correct. And that's sort of a divergence from what we normally see. And I think probably the lack of people just looking for the sake of looking sort of weeds down the amount of unrepresented people. And the good news is that if you're a seller considering having an open house, the effect of that is that you're getting more bang for your buck, given that typically agent or buyers that have agency representations or buyers that already are affiliated with an agent are typically more serious and typically more in the market than buyers who don't, as most of the buyers that have agents have already been pre-approved and they already sort of are really serious about their search. Right, exactly. So the second to last question I have is, did you find that, so we had multiple offers on this property, which speaks a little bit to the supply and demand of the district, but out of those people, do you have a sense of how many people wrote as a result of it? Do you think the open house was sort of the critical piece to the puzzle? And lastly, sort of the second question that ties to this is, do you think the open house was a useful tool as it was, I would say, pre-pandemic?
Okay, so two-part question. The first part, yes, several of the offers were from people that had come through the open house. In fact, the buyer that ended up going under contract was somebody who had come through the open house and was represented by an agent. So on that level, I think it was very useful to do the open house because they were able to, look and kind of go through the house a little more carefully. I don't know where their agent was. Maybe their agent was showing other people property. And we had several people that are very good about identifying themselves as having agents. So yeah, I think it did make a difference. I think it was, from what we heard, it was helpful. And because I did engage in dialogue with people about their searches and their agents, and they thanked us for doing the open house. So they found it valuable. In terms of big picture, open house is just very different. It's a totally, totally different vibe. Pre-pandemic, people would hang out in open houses. They'd chat with you for a while. So that was very different.
We used to have food out. We do all sorts of things.
Yeah. No, it was come sanitize your hands, sign in, go through the house, walk out. A lot of times sanitize their hands on the way out and move on. So it was a different vibe. So yeah, I think it was a productive thing, obviously, because we did have several offers from people that had come through the open house. But I cannot stress enough how different it was. People had masks on, were very, very careful about how close they were to each other. So the good news is the house sold.
And that's great. So you were also, so one of the things we sort of figured out is it's the person that ultimately bought the property or is under contract on it was somebody who had seen the property when it was on the market prior to the open. Yeah. And then the perception is that the open house sort of confirmed what they already knew, which is that they really liked the property. And obviously with that added confirmation, probably gave them a little bit more confidence to pay a little bit more for the property than they otherwise would have. So that's all great things. So this is really interesting about how the market has sort of moved and changed and things have ebbed and flowed when it comes to the during pandemic, the post-pandemic world versus the pre-pandemic market. We're going to continue to sort of do these updates on various elements. So some of these we might come back to open houses again if we feel that things have changed. I know we've talked about them in earlier videos about whether they work in a pre-pandemic, and I'll put a link to that up above. But it'll be interesting to sort of look at that video versus where we are now and see how maybe the experiences and usefulness of open houses has changed. So that concludes our episode. Hopefully you found this useful. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below or send us an email at info@richteamre.com. If you have other questions that are outside this video, also put them in the comments below or in a link, and we will actually do a video most likely on that question, because we are getting questions here and there that we had not thought of. And obviously, if you think they're useful, we'd be happy to cover them and feature them. So thanks everybody for watching. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.